Welcome to the Deep Dive, everybody. And today we were talking all about story science.
Ooh, fun.
The kind of the field that really looks into how our brains are wired for stories.
That's a good one.
And I am joined by
Oh, hey.
an expert to guide us through this a little bit.
Hi. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. We're
Um,
going to be using
we're gonna be.
Lisa Prahn's book,
Yes,
Wired for Story,
it's a good one.
which is a treasure trove of insight
Yeah, it is.
on this topic.
Absolutely.
It's funny. We are just bombarded with stories
Ooh.
all the time, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, from the news to, movies we watch to, the crazy thing your neighbor told you. Like,
Right. I.
how often do we actually stop and think, like, why do some stories just totally grab us
Mm-hmm.
and others just fall flat?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think that's where this idea of story science gets really, really interesting.
Okay.
It's not just about entertainment. It's really about, how stories help us learn, remember things, and connect with each other and with information.
That's true.
So Cron has this really great analogy in the book.
Okay.
She says, imagine that you're trying to convince someone to buy an SUV.
Okay.
You could give them, a whole stack of technical specs and information about the car.
Okay. Yeah.
Or you could tell them a story about how that SUV, helped a family escape a wildfire.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which one's going to be more persuasive?
Exactly.
I know what you're going to say.
I think most of us would be.
I'm going for the story.
Yeah, drawn to that story because our brains, they aren't really wired for just like dry data. They're wired for these narratives.
Yeah.
Stories make information just come alive.
That's
You
true.
give it context and meaning.
Yeah, it's like the difference between reading a history textbook
Right.
versus
Exactly.
like hearing your grandparents tell you stories about their lives.
Yes.
It's like
Absolutely.
one is just facts and figures.
Mm-hmm.
The other one makes you feel like you were there.
Yeah, you're completely immersed in that world.
Totally.
And that's because of that emotional engagement.
Yeah.
That is so key.
Yeah.
When we feel something, we remember it
That's true.
like so much better.
That's true. It's why you might forget like all the details of a presentation.
Right, exactly.
But you'll remember like one funny anecdote that the speaker told.
Yes, that's such a great example.
Right. Okay, so we're hardwired for these stories. But why?
Yeah, that's the big question, is it?
What's the like evolutionary advantage of being a storytelling species?
And I think that's one of the most fascinating things that Cron really dives into in this book.
Okay.
And, she argues that stories are really like flight simulators for life. Okay. So they help us kind of explore these potential situations and learn from the experiences of other people without us actually having to like face those risks ourselves.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
It's like a safe space to experiment and learn.
So when we read about, like a character facing some kind of moral dilemma, our brains are like running a simulation.
Yes,
Okay, if I was in that situation, what would I do?
exactly. Like a little thought experiment,
Wow.
and that mental rehearsal,
Mm-hmm.
it helps us develop empathy,
Oh.
make better decisions, and even just understand like complex concepts.
Interesting.
Right.
We're training our brains
Yeah. We're constantly training our brains.
through these fictional scenarios.
Exactly.
Wow.
To navigate the complexities of life
Yeah.
and relationships and all of that.
That's wild.
So it's a really powerful tool.
Okay, so that's why we tell stories. But what actually makes them work?
Yeah, good question.
What makes a story work?
So one of I think the most compelling aspects of story science
Okay.
is understanding what actually makes a story work,
Okay.
right? Like what are the elements that really resonate with our brains?
Yeah.
And Cron really highlights that it often just comes down to the way a story taps into our brain's natural wiring.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
Give me the key elements. Okay, so what makes it click?
For starters, there's this concept of the story question. Okay. Think of it as like the engine that drives the narrative forward.
Okay.
It's the core problem or
Yeah.
challenge that keeps us hooked
Okay.
until we get the answer. Okay,
Can you give me like an example?
sure. Yeah.
I'm having a little trouble picturing that.
So let's say you're watching a mystery movie.
Okay.
All right. The story question is usually something like,
Yeah.
will the detective catch the killer before they strike again?
Ooh. Okay, got it.
Right.
So that question creates the suspense.
Exactly.
It keeps you glued to the screen.
Yes.
Because you got to know.
You need to know the answer. And if a story doesn't establish that question early on, it's kind of like driving around aimlessly.
Yeah.
You know, you might have a great car, but no one knows where you're going.
I have definitely read books
Right?
where I'm like halfway through and I'm like,
Yes.
wait, what's the point of all this?
Exactly.
It's so frustrating.
And chances are,
yeah.
those stories were missing that clear story question. It's like the foundation upon which everything else is built.
All right. So
Yeah.
strong story question.
Yes.
Crucial.
Absolutely.
What else? What else is important?
All right. So another critical element is conflict.
Okay. Why is conflict so important?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's a good question.
can't a story just be about happy people
Right.
doing nice things?
You know, it might sound counterintuitive,
Okay.
but without conflict,
Mm-hmm.
there is no story.
Ooh.
Okay. Our brains, they crave resolution. You know, we are wired
Yeah.
to look for solutions to problems. Okay.
And stories,
Yeah.
they give us that safe space to experience those solutions
Okay.
vicariously.
So it's not just about having a problem. It's about seeing how that problem gets resolved.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And the more difficult the problem,
Yeah.
the more satisfying that resolution is.
Okay.
Right. So think about some of like the most gripping stories you've encountered, you know, books, movies, even like personal anecdotes.
Yeah.
Chances are they all involve characters
Okay.
who are facing like significant obstacles. Right.
That makes sense.
And it's those challenges
Yeah.
that really keep us engaged.
Okay, so next time I'm tempted to write a story about a perfect character, or
Right.
a perfect life.
Exactly.
I got to throw in some conflict.
Yes. You need that struggle
Got it.
because it makes us root for the character.
Okay.
And it makes their eventual triumph all the more satisfying.
This is making me think about those presentations at work.
Not where it's just like data, data, data.
All right, exactly.
It's so boring.
It can be.
But if they tell a story about how they overcame some challenge
Yes.
to get those results,
Totally.
it's like instantly more engaging.
Right. Because stories tap into our emotions. And when we're emotionally invested,
Yeah.
we're way more likely to pay attention
Okay.
and remember that information.
So stories aren't just for entertainment.
No, not at all.
They are a powerful tool for communication
Yeah.
and persuasion.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, one of the key things that we're talking about here is that understanding the science behind storytelling can help us make our own communication way more impactful.
That's a really good point.
Right.
So before we jump into like
Yeah.
some of the things that can make a story fall flat, I want to kind of pause here and just ask you as our listener, like what's standing out to you so far?
Yeah, what are you thinking about?
What's resonating with you? Have you started thinking about the stories you encountered differently?
Yeah. Have you noticed any of these things in the stories that you love?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating how, you know, our brains, they crave that resolution, you know, that sense of closure
Okay.
that comes from seeing a conflict resolved. And, you know, it's not just in fiction either.
Okay.
You think about your own life, you know, you're constantly facing challenges, big and small.
Oh, totally.
Right. Whether it's
Yeah.
figuring out, you know, how to fix that leaky faucet or, you know, navigating a difficult conversation with a friend or a family member. Like we are all
That's true.
problem solvers at heart, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think that's why conflict in stories, it feels so relatable.
Okay.
You know, it mirrors our own experiences
That's true.
in a way.
Yeah, it's like we're watching someone else go through the trial by fire.
Yes, exactly. So we don't have to.
Or maybe we're seeing them succeed where we've struggled.
Yeah.
Which can be inspiring.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah. And maybe gives you ideas for how to solve your own problems.
Exactly. And the way that character overcomes those obstacles is what really makes us invest in their journey.
Okay.
You know, and that's where I think understanding their internal world comes into play.
Okay, their internal world. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so Cron talks about
Okay.
how important it is to understand the why behind a character's actions,
Okay.
right? So not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it.
Okay.
What are their motivations?
Mm-hmm.
What are they afraid of?
Okay.
What do they want more than anything?
So it's not enough to just, like, throw obstacles in their way.
Right.
You have to understand why those obstacles matter to them?
Exactly.
Personally.
Because when we understand that internal struggle,
Okay.
we become more invested in their journey. We start to empathize with them,
Okay.
even if you don't necessarily agree with their choices.
That's interesting.
Right.
I'm thinking about a book I read recently
Yeah.
where the main character was, like, making some really questionable decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But because the author did such a good job of showing her internal conflict,
Yes.
I found myself rooting for her anyway.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's such a great example,
Yeah.
you know, because even if a character is flawed or makes mistakes,
Yeah.
we can still connect with them if we understand their motivations.
It's true.
Right.
This makes me think about how we perceive people in real life, too.
Oh, totally.
If someone does something that seems, like, out of character, we always try to understand why, what's going on with them.
Right, exactly.
What are they going through?
What's their story? What led them to this moment?
Totally. And it's like that same principle applies to storytelling.
Absolutely.
The more we understand the inner workings of a character, the more compelling they become.
So how do we, as writers, or even just like communicators, tap into that internal world?
That's the big question.
How do we like make sure that conflict feels authentic and engaging?
You know, one way to do that is to think about the character's backstory, but in a very specific way.
Okay.
Right? We don't need to know every single detail of their past.
Okay.
But we do need to understand the key experiences that have shaped who they are.
So if we were writing a story about a young woman who's afraid of commitment, we might explore like a past relationship where she got hurt.
Exactly. That past experience would inform her current fear.
Okay.
And it would make her reluctance to commit more relatable and believable.
I'm starting to see how all of this fits together now.
Yeah, it's all connected.
The story question sets the stage.
Yeah.
The conflict drives the narrative.
It's the engine.
And the character's internal world gives it like depth.
Yes. Depth and emotional resonance.
That's it. Okay. You're getting it.
So understanding story science is not just about like mastering plot points and structure.
It's more than that.
It's about tapping into like the emotional core of the story.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Because ultimately, stories are about connecting with people on an emotional level.
Oh, okay.
You know, we want them to feel something.
Okay.
To laugh, to cry, to be surprised, to be moved.
Yeah, like that feeling you get when you finish a really good book.
Yes.
And you just want to talk about it with everyone you know.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
And I think that the more we understand about how our brains are wired for stories, the better equipped we'll be to create those kinds of powerful emotional experiences.
Now, you mentioned earlier that there's this concept called the story core.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. This is where we really go even deeper into the heart of the story.
Okay.
So Cron breaks down the story core into 3 essential elements.
Okay.
The first one is like what's happening.
Okay.
Okay. On the surface,
yeah,
this seems pretty straightforward,
yeah,
right? It's the plot, the actions, the events that are taking place.
Okay.
But it goes deeper than that.
Okay.
It's about understanding the underlying forces that are driving those events.
So it's not just about what's happening on the surface. It's about the deeper meaning behind those events.
Exactly.
Okay. What are the other 2 elements?
Okay. So the second element is what's at stake. Okay. This is about understanding the consequences of the protagonist's choices. Right. What do they stand to lose or gain?
Why should we care about what happens to them?
So this goes back to that idea of like keeping the reader engaged.
Exactly. You have to give them a reason to root for the character.
Yeah, you got
and to worry about their feat.
Make me care about this character.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then finally, the third element, which might be the most crucial, is what's the point? Okay. This gets to the heart of the story's message, right? What are we trying to say about the human condition? What do we want the reader to take away from this story?
So it's not just about like entertaining the reader. It's also about like making them think, feel, and maybe even see the world in a new way.
Exactly. And when we can successfully weave all three of these elements together,
Okay.
you know the what's happening, the what's at stake, and the what's the point.
Yeah.
We create a story that is both engaging and meaningful.
Okay.
A story that resonates on multiple levels.
I love it.
Right.
This is so helpful.
It's a powerful framework.
I feel like I'm already starting to see my own writing in a new light.
That's awesome.
I'm also starting to think more critically about the stories I consume too.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of understanding story science. It's not just for writers.
Okay.
It gives us this framework for thinking about all the stories we encounter in our lives.
In our lives.
Right.
Yeah, it's like we're developing this X-ray vision for storytelling.
Totally.
You know, we can start to see like the underlying structures and motivations that drive narratives.
Absolutely.
Whether it's in a book or a movie or even just like a conversation with a friend.
Right, or a news article.
Yeah, really. Or a tweet.
Yeah, exactly. Once you start thinking about stories in this way, you see them everywhere.
You do.
It's kind of amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
So now that we have this like newfound understanding of story science, are there any common pitfalls that writers should avoid?
Ooh, yeah, good question. Yeah, Cron talks about these as like the boring parts.
Okay.
And they often trip writers up because they don't actually serve the story.
Like what?
Yeah, give us an example.
Yeah.
One of the biggest culprits is like excessive backstory. You know, sometimes writers feel this need to give us every single detail about a character's past. But the truth is, we only need to know the information that's relevant to the present story.
So it's like going on a road trip.
Yes. I love that analogy.
And having someone tell you their entire life story before you even leave the driveway.
Right. You're just like...
You just want to go.
Can we go already?
I want to see the sights.
I want to see what's happening now. Yeah. Not what happened 20 years ago.
Totally. What else? What else can kind of bog down a narrative?
Unnecessary details can also be a problem. So you know every detail in a story.
Okay.
It should serve a purpose, right? If a detail isn't moving the plot forward or revealing something about a character or creating atmosphere, it's probably best to just cut it.
Yeah.
You know, a less is often more when it comes to keeping a reader engaged.
This makes me think about those descriptions in some novels.
Oh, yeah.
That just go on for pages and pages.
Right.
Describing every single brick in a building or every leaf on the tree.
Yeah.
I've definitely skimmed my way through a few of those.
I think we all have.
Yeah.
The key is to be selective and just make sure every detail earns its place within this story.
So to recap what we've learned today, the power of story.
Yeah.
The importance of conflict.
Yes.
The story question. The story core.
The story core.
And some common pitfalls to avoid.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's a lot.
To digest.
But I think the most important takeaway for me, at least, is that...
Yeah, what is it?
Like, understanding story science can make us not only better writers, but also more engaged readers.
Absolutely.
Listeners and communicators.
Yes.
In all aspects of our lives.
In all aspects of our lives.
Because at the end of the day, we're all storytellers.
We are.
In one way or another.
You know, we tell stories to share experiences, to connect with other people.
Yeah.
To make sense of the world around us.
That's beautifully said.
So too.
So I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought-provoking question.
Yes, a good one.
Now that you know a bit about story science, how might you use that knowledge to make your own communication more powerful?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Or what's a story that has really captivated you lately, and why do you think it works so well?
Yes.
Take some time.
Yeah, think about that.
Reflect on those questions and see where they lead you.
See where they lead you.
And of course, if you want to dive even deeper into this topic,
yes, please do.
We highly recommend checking out Lisa Cron's book.
Yes.
Wired for Story.
That's a good one.
It's a game changer.
Absolutely.
For anyone who wants to understand the power of narrative.
It really is.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thanks for being here.
On this deep dive into story science.
Yeah, this is fun.
We hope you enjoyed the journey.
I did.
And that you'll continue to explore the world of stories with this newfound appreciation to the science behind them.
I love it.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye.